Welcome everyone. Good evening everybody. Thanks for being here on a Thursday night on the close to the Labor Day weekend. We have our dear guest traveled all the way from the East Coast. He's here with us now with his wife Mary. Welcome here, Dr. Parillo and Mary, to this place. So let me read a quick biography of theirs. Vincent Parillo is Professor Emeritus of Sociology at William Paterson University. Yes, this is the famous Paterson, the city of Paterson in New Jersey. William Paterson University, where he twice received its Faculty Achievement Award for Distinguished Scholarship and Creative Expression, as well as this prestigious Legacy Award. He is the author of two critically acclaimed historical novels, Guardians of the Gate and its sequel, Defenders of Freedom, both about Ellis Island, its staff, and immigrants, the story of immigration to the United States. In addition, Vince is executive producer, writer, and narrator of 6 award-winning PBS television documentaries, 6 Silk City Artists and Musicians, Ellis Island, Gateway to America, Smokestacks and Steeples, A Portrait of Paterson, Guatemala Federici, The Sculpture Laureate of Paterson, Paterson and Its People, and Paterson, A Delicious Destination. An intentionally recognized expert of immigration and Fulbright scholar, Vince has given talks at more than 100 universities in Asia, Europe, and North America. He is general editor of Encyclopedia of Social Problems and has also published numerous textbooks on immigration and diversity, some of them translated into languages such as Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Italian, and Vietnamese. Vincent, a collection of his work, is an anthology of many of his public presentations in the US and abroad, as well as numerous published essays, book forwards, book chapters, and scholarly journal articles. But today we are here for his book, Hearts and Minds, Hizmet Schools and its contribution to interethnic understanding and relations. So please help me welcome Vince to the stage. Hi, Vince. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I would like, before I begin, to thank Attila for all that he has done to make my journey here very effective, efficient, and pleasant. So thank you, sir, for all that you've been doing. And it's so nice to see all of you. Hello. I guess the easiest way to work into this subject is to tell you I'm a sociologist, and as you heard from my introduction, I've done a great deal looking at interethnic relations, immigration, and so forth. I've also served as an education consultant to a number of schools. And so it was that combination in my background and experience that attracted me to learn more about the Hizmet schools when I learned about them. At that time, Hizmet was not a term being used yet, but I attended some of the various, it was the Interfaith Dialogue Center at that time before it became the Peace Islands Institute. I went to some of their dinners and some of their different activities and started to learn and was given, did a lot of research on Mr. Gulan and on the schools. And it intrigued me that here you had these schools that had a dual mission. They wanted to promote a quality education. But at the same time, the second mission and goal was to promote not just tolerance and understanding of the other, but actually to encourage interactions, acceptance, and so forth. And so I wondered how successful these schools would be in different countries. And I wondered, because the countries might have different cultures and histories and demographics, how those elements would cross into the missions of the schools. What would be those cross currents? Would there be any differences to be found? And so that was how we set out to do this. With a colleague of mine, Mahmoud Ansari, the two of us journeyed over a 4-year period at the end of each academic year when we could do it, to different countries. We first decided we wanted to look at Muslim majority countries. And so we went to Bosnia and Albania the first year and Kazakhstan the second. Now, just saying Muslim majority does not do justice to those countries. They have radically different histories and cultures. And so that would be an interesting dimension to see how those cross currents worked as well. Then we went to Muslim minority countries, Christian countries, Poland and Romania. We also wanted to look at countries that are Christian in terms of their dominance, but are really secular multicultural countries, and that is, of course, Canada and the United States. So 3 different social milieu, if you will, to look at. Now, to do this, we were going to be interviewing people. Now, there are secrets to being a good interviewer and getting good answers. You want honest answers. You don't want people telling you what they think they want you to hear. You don't want to ask leading questions that are feeding in the answer. So there is a whole kind of scientific methodology that we employ in terms of how we conduct these interviews and what we ask and how we pursue doing it. And some of the most important things there are, and we follow guidelines set up by our university's Institutional Review Board of how you conduct such interviews. We assure everybody that they are confidential, that they're anonymous. We picked who we wanted to interview. We didn't ask people to set up people to program them and tell us what they wanted us to hear. So there was a whole big important business about the selection process, as well as how it was conducted. And what we wound up doing was interviewing about 36 different educational administrators of elementary, high school, and colleges. We interviewed well over 24 or more teachers at all different levels. We interviewed about 140, 150 students from the 5th grade on through postgraduate alumni. We also interviewed a great many parents, tens, I can't even remember, 50, 40 different parents. And we also interviewed close to 20 businessmen who were the financial supporters of these schools in all these different areas. So what I'm trying to share with you is we had a really good cross-section of different people that we selected when we were at these places. Now, of course, getting to do that was not an easy task either. We started with the Peace Islands Institute that is in Hasbrook Heights right now, and they reached out over to Europe. There was no tight network. There was no directory to look up and know how to call. Somebody knew somebody who taught at one school, or they went to the website and reached out. But in order to parlay our being able to get there and be accepted. And even when we were there, we had to convince the various administrators of the purity of our intentions. We were not there to evaluate their school and tell somebody else whether they were doing a good job or not, because even the schools were going to remain anonymous. There was some reluctance of going into a room and interviewing a young girl, and we had to deal with various protocols and ethics and concerns and all of that. So there was a great deal. It wasn't just some slapdash, oh, let's go over someplace and talk to people. It wasn't that. This is a very solid scientific investigation. And so what I think is most important is, okay, you did this, what did you find? We also were looking at some other little elements. Back in 2012, when we were starting this, there were still many attacks on the Gulen movement and on the schools as having a secret political agenda or having a secret religious agenda. And so we wanted to see if we could look into that one way or the other. What we found were so many interesting things. I can't share all of them with you, but I'll start with the book's title, Hearts and Minds. The title is very deliberate. I can recall still interviewing this one 15-year-old boy in a high school in Albania, And he was talking about what the teachers do. And he says, it is important what they do. They teach you here, and that is important. But it is also important what is here. And it was that little trigger, and then later, other people actually, and they're quoted in the book here, use the term hearts and minds. The cover is of a hot air balloon floating over the land in the shape of a heart. And the beauty of this is that there are no borders to be seen. This is a concept, just like the movement, of going worldwide, irrespective of who is there and what they believe, but what is the best of all human values and ethics. One of the most interesting things I found after looking at these schools was how many of the young girls from about age 12 or 13 through 15, in that area especially, how many of the young girls talked about the school giving them more self-confidence. I had one girl, I remember her speaking to me in Kazakhstan, and she wasn't even a Kazakh, she was Chinese. And her father was a diplomat, and she was attending the school in Kazakhstan, and said, I had very, very low self-esteem. I didn't like myself. And the first day in class, the teacher said, please make her feel welcome. And she said, from that moment on, things changed for me. The schools we found, in terms of structure, were state-of-the-art, modern, excellent facilities. Teachers usually are very dedicated people. Not every teacher is a good one. We all know that. I think all of us can recall some teacher we wish we hadn't had. No schools are perfect. Not every teacher is excellent. But what we found in these schools, generally speaking, cutting across the different cultures, was not only a widespread dedication to doing the job, not just as a teacher, to develop the knowledge and expand one's horizons that way, but also to inculcate in the person what it means to be a good person. And how do you do that? And many a teacher would say to me, we don't do it by talking about it. We do it by example. And students in all of these 7 countries, both the boys and the girls, and the young men and young women I interviewed as graduates, would say, he was more than a teacher to me. He was like my brother. She was like my big sister. The bond we found between teacher and student was incredible. Incredible tight bonding. It varied with the cultures, of course. For example, many of you know about the whole idea of Turkish tea and tea time. And that is, of course, a big popular thing in the Balkans as well. And so in countries like Bosnia and in Albania and even in Kazakhstan, one of the students' favorite times was after classes at tea time and what they would talk about. And it was never structured. It was just talking about life in general, ethics, doing the right thing, feeling free as a student to seek advice from a teacher that you might not even seek from your own parents. There were those kinds of things going on. There was the visits that were done by teachers to each family at least once a year. And if the family lived 2 or 3 hours away because they were boarding, the teacher's own family would accompany that teacher to visit that family. There were many reasons those visits occurred. One was, of course, the bonding. One was to check out the economic well-being of these families to see if they needed additional scholarship aid. There were those kinds of things that were going on. But what was also rather intriguing, and what you'll find in the book, The book contains the voices of all these people, the voices of the students, the voices of their parents, the voices of their teachers and their administrators, and the financial supporters. I asked one businessman, why did he give so much money to this particular school? And he gave me a one-word answer: humanity. I asked him to elaborate. People with money often spend so much money for bad things or for selfish things. I have money, I take care of my family, but why can I not take money and do good instead of bad for the younger generation? Bosnia is a country that, if you remember back in the 1990s, was war-ravaged, civil war in essence. Many Muslims were killed, the so-called ethnic cleansing, the horribleness of what went on in there, somewhat like is going on in Ukraine today, I'm afraid. But what we had was this horrible, horrible time. In Sarajevo, Sarajevo was known as the Jerusalem of Europe because all the religions were side by side. In fact, literally in Sarajevo, on one street corner, is a mosque, a synagogue, and a Christian church. I interviewed this man. He was the father of a 15-year-old girl. He was not wealthy. He was working class. He was a TV cameraman. And I asked him, why was he supporting the school? And he told me a story. And as he unfolded with his story, the tears just started streaming down his face. He said, before the war, we all got along. We didn't even know what each other was, and we didn't care. We were just neighbors and friends. And then it all changed. And what my daughter has learned at this school and has brought back to me, I found my old feelings coming back of what once was. And if a school can do that, I want to support that school. We found this time and again in so many ways. I could spend hours here sharing with you, but perhaps you'll get more out of it from the book. But I will say to you that the schools were, we found, the living embodiment of what the mission said. They do succeed in teaching the STEM subjects, the science, the technology, engineering, math courses, in equal measure to both males and females. Females, as I mentioned before, felt very much not only enlightened, but also feeling that self-esteem. We found that that second mission of promoting interethnic understanding and acceptance was very much succeeding. I had so many parents say, my child changed. She used to be so prejudiced, so closed-minded, so intolerant, so unaccepting, and now she has friends who are not, and that would be, she has Muslim friends, she has Christian friends, whatever, but friends of another faith. I found the students saying that time and again too. I had a student in Poland who was young and small of stature, a boy, and his first year there he was being picked on and beat up. He was Christian. He was being picked on and so forth. But as the school continued with its goal of educating and enlightening and promoting the people that he was so afraid of and beaten by, he said, by the next year they were my best friends. We found that time and again. Parents, most of whom, as I said, knew nothing of Mr. Gulan, they referred to these schools as the Turkish schools. That's how they were known. The parents loved the schools for three reasons. The education, the quality education. They also loved them because they were safe. no gangs, no bullying. Kids talked about it. Some of these kids had gone to public schools and transferred in. Some of them had brothers or sisters or friends and could tell the difference between the public schools and the private schools. So there's all of that going on. We did find differences, cultural differences to be sure. One of the reasons the schools succeeded is they immersed themselves in the culture of the country. In Kazakhstan, the Kazakh language was taught. Kazakh history was taught. We found that the promotion of this was far more prevalent than in Canada or here in the United States. Here in the United States, the Hizmet schools compete with very strong quality suburban schools. In many of these countries like Albania, Poland, Romania, and so forth, the public schools, everybody wants to get out of them. The competition to get into the Hizmet schools is fierce and strong. Unfortunately, only small numbers are taken. I had one school, they had 1,500 applicants for a class of 50. That's part of how it is. There is so much I could really tell you, but I've already been signaled that I have 5 minutes left. We're on a time frame here. So let me go in a little bit of a different direction here with this. What we found, besides the quality education, besides the business of promoting tolerance and acceptance, there was no secret agenda. We probed for it in many different ways with subtle questions and so forth. Christians did not feel uncomfortable or pressured to convert. Muslims did not feel pressured to observe prayer at the 5 times and people getting on their case about it. Religion was not taught in the schools. Comparative religion course might be taught at on an upper level, but that's taught in all schools. So what we found was many, many positive things. And I have to say to you, of all the many kinds of research I have done in my career, this was one of the most rewarding and most positive of all, as I continue to get so much positive input in so many different countries, from so many different people, from all those shades of life I told you about before. And again, that was why it was so important for me to tell you at the beginning how safe these questions would be for them to answer. It was amazing. I am evaluating the schools. What I wanted to see, and I found, was that the schools are successful in their people are very much positively impacted. So many talked about role models. So many talked about the changes in their life. So many talked about what kind of person they became. And how many of them also said, I want to give back. I want others to have the experience I had. It was an amazing thing. For those of you who have been part of these school systems, I know some of you are here in this room, you kind of think you're doing a good job, and from time to time, people do undoubtedly tell you are. But this was bigger. This was broader. This study, I think, should help those of you who are educators or supporters of these schools to feel not only a sense of pride, as much as you're allowed to be proud, but also a sense of accomplishment, of fulfillment. This movement, with its goals of promoting the ethical human values of Islam to others, no matter who their faith is, and no matter what country they live in, and no matter what socioeconomic class they come from, has been immensely successful. And to that end, I congratulate those of you who are a part of the system, and I thank you for this opportunity to tell you a little bit about it.